What is one lie you must keep up that you hate, but it covers up a much bigger screw up? My wife and I were at my parents' house helping them organize things in the attic. My wife slipped at one point and stepped right through the bedroom ceiling. I picked her back up and I could hear my parents yelling, "What was that? What happened?" She started crying because she's always trying to impress my parents. So I yelled down, "I stepped through the ceiling, sorry," and took the blame. Years later, my family still makes fun of me for the incident. I just look over at my wife and wink. I have 3. Each one was the worst in its own way. The day my father was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease, I cried. I'm not a crier or a very emotional person. I'm more Vulcan-like, I guess. Not saying I'm a hard ass, just that I'm good at keeping up appearances. That caused me to lose it. That's the impact it had on me. The worst lie I maintained was that there was any improvement or ever going to be any improvement, no matter what medicine he took. My parents were both hopeful. My family was hopeful. People prayed left and right, and every good day was met with praise Jesus and maybe it isn't Lou Gehrig's after all. They basically forced me to say maybe they were right plenty of times. I didn't want to tell them the truth. He isn't going to get better. He's going to become more paralyzed until he can't get enough oxygen. Then he's going to die. Even the day he went out for a hospice weekend, my mom and I were his only caregivers 24/7 for years. I wanted to pull my mom to the side and say, "This is CO2 poisoning. He can't breathe out enough, and it's building up in his system. Say your goodbyes. His time is short." I recognized his change in behavior. I recognized his symptoms. Even the nurse at the hospice place wouldn't have any of it. I could barely open my mouth. Well, he died that day, just like I knew they would. And I couldn't very well go and tell him goodbye. I did the best I could without alerting him to the possibility of it. There's 2 lies, I guess. The third lie is that I hated to see him go. No, I loved to see him go. I didn't cry when he died. His suffering was finally over. Almost every minute of his last 6 months was hell for him. He could barely move anything at all. I mourned when he was still alive, but not enough people in my life would understand that for me to ever tell anyone I knew in real life. Thanks for listening, Reddit. I've never told anyone this, and don't suspect I ever will again. I once worked at a large store and walked up to a coworker to ask a question. I must have startled her, B/C as I was asking. I noticed a weird look on her face and suddenly realized that she was peeing herself. I pretended not to notice and made some excuse to leave and came back a little later to see her mopping it up. I said, "Did a customer spill another drink again?" and wandered off. I told all my coworkers that a customer had spilled soda all over the floor in her department. I came up with a lie so I wouldn't have to go to my sister's friend's surprise party. I told her I had some homework to finish up that was due that night. There was no assignment. I just didn't feel like going. My sister came over and said I should at least sign the card. My sister then very strongly suggested that her friend really likes me. So now I do want to go, but I already told the lie. So now I backtrack saying that the assignment was almost done and I could turn it in now for a 90. I go to the party. We hook up 3 days later and I'm still dating her. The annoying part is whenever anyone tells the story of how we got together, they say that I got a lower grade on an assignment so I could see her. I really want to correct it, but there is no graceful way I can think of to do so. That I can't smell anything. I told my best friend that in 3rd grade to sound cool. The problem is that he has a photographic memory. I'm trained to never make a comment about smells. My parents even think I can't smell. They paid for a doctor to look at it. The doctor said, "Oh, sometimes this happens, it's probably nothing to worry about." Worst doctor ever. I can't get out of it. Ever. I'm stuck. I used to serve at a major chain restaurant. When I messed up or forgot to bring something to a table, it was never my fault. I'd blame the kitchen, the bartender, the busboy, anything, but admit I made a mistake. So this particular night I sat a 3-top comprised of 2 adults and a boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old. The parents order their drinks and ask for a kid-sized milk for their son. I bring them an adult-sized milk by mistake and the dad says, "Oh, excuse me, but we wanted a kid-sized milk." I lie, yeah, we're actually all out of kid cups, so that's all we have. I'm sorry. My manager forgot to place the order for them this week. He believes my story and everything is fine. But then I get sat an 8 top with 4 kids and 4 adults. I'm forced to carry on this charade to the next table, being out of kid cups, because they're in plain sight of the 3 top. And the next table, and the next. Not me, but my roommate freshman and sophomore years at college was put on academic probation for failing and lost her full ride scholarship. She was too afraid to tell her parents, so she started stripping to pay tuition. Last time I talked to her, she never finished college, is still at the strip club, and her parents still think she's a graduate that just can't find a job. When I was a kid, I chased my little brother outside with a spoon. Once we got outside, he got on top of our car and started yelling. No clue why I was chasing him with a spoon, or why I cared about him yelling. After he wouldn't get down, I threw the spoon at him, aiming for his stomach. Trying to avoid it, he ducked and it hit him in the face right next to his left eye. After he calmed down, I took him back into the house and told my mom he fell. He was hurt pretty bad. The spoon didn't just barely hit him. It caused permanent damage to that eye that he had to deal with for years. He wasn't blinded or anything, but his vision was impaired. He was too young to remember, I'm 3 years older than him, that it was my fault, so he doesn't know it was me. Not the biggest lie ever, cause we were both kids and I didn't do it on purpose, but it's still pretty shitty to know that I did that to someone. When I was 15 and only had a driver's permit, I fell asleep behind the wheel and rolled the truck I was driving. My mom was asleep in the passenger side and luckily we were not injured. She ended up telling the cops it was her driving, since I would have been impossible to insure when and if I did get my license at 16 years old. It's not really a story that comes up often, but I have always felt terrible that it went on her driving record. Ever since that accident, I've made it a point to be a safe driver, and 8 years later have not been in another car wreck, knock on wood. Why don't you travel? Or even just go down to the USA for a day trip? Gas is cheaper down there, blah blah. I live in Canada, just on the other side of the border. I have to make all kinds of excuses, like trying to save money by not going on vacations, not having a passport yet, having prior obligations / plans, stuff like that. The real reason, I've got a criminal record. I work as a bar manager, and both my boss and I are military vets. Actually, that's mostly how I got the job. We struck up a conversation and I discussed my time in the service. Except that my 6-year enlistment ended at around 3 years, 2 months. I didn't go a war/UA or drink myself stupid. Mostly, I would oversleep, and I was a shithead in my early 20s. Not my finest hour. I left with a general discharge, so I still had college paid for in Texas, but very few know about this. I couldn't reveal this, and honestly, the lie has manifested into the status quo. Everything I have has been predicated upon a lie. My jobs, my girlfriend, who's a veteran, and even a good amount of friends have no clue. My girlfriend and I were sitting around visiting with a bunch of friends. She was sitting on my lap and someone else was talking, so no one was looking at us. All of a sudden I felt my girlfriend seize up as she stifled a sneeze. Unfortunately, holding back the sneeze caused her to rip a massive fart. The fart was so huge that every head in the room turned towards us with a look of shock and awe on their faces. I just smiled sheepishly and said, "Excuse me." All the guys cracked up, and the girls feigned disgust until the aroma hit their nostrils. It was a rancid, vulgar odor that cleared everyone out of the room. The group had a few good laughs and made fun of me for years for that fart. That's okay. That night, and many nights thereafter, I was amply rewarded for chivalry. I had a longboarding accident a year ago, and I ended up injuring myself pretty badly. I got tendonitis in my ankle from a previous complication, bursitis in my hip, and I needed 8 stitches in my face. My boss would always tell me, "Yeah, no, one day you're gonna fall off that thing and seriously injure yourself." So I lied and said I fell while chasing a dog down a hill. Now he kind of pities me and lets me take it easy if my hip starts to act up. My husband and I were spending a few days with my dad and stepmom at their house, and we were hanging out downstairs when I go upstairs to change clothes. My husband runs up a few minutes later to use the bathroom. Since he is in the guest bathroom, I use the one in the master bedroom. When I come out, my husband is standing in the doorway of the guest room, silently and frantically motioning for me to come over. When I get in the room he says, "Dude, I clogged the toilet, and it won't flush. You have got to find a plunger." So I'm looking around upstairs, but can't locate one. I tell him I'll have to go down and ask my dad where they keep it, and he begs me to take the blame, to save him the embarrassment of clogging my parents' toilet with his massive poops. When I ask my dad where the plunger is, he gives me a weird look, and I tell him that I accidentally clogged the toilet. Him and my stepmom go on a scavenger hunt for one, but come up empty-handed. My stepmom is like, "I don't think we have a plunger." WTF. Who doesn't keep a plunger for those unexpected moments? Great. Now what? My husband is still hiding in the guest bedroom. Since no plunger can be located, my stepmom gets a yardstick from her craft room and proceeds to the bathroom to unclog the toilet. She fucking chops my husband's poop into enough tiny pieces to flush the toilet with a fucking yardstick, giving me looks. Dad too. My husband emerges from the master bathroom, toilet flushing in the background. What's going on? I told him I clogged the toilet, and he starts laughing, and my parents start teasing me, making poop jokes, and talking about how they are going to have to get my stepmom a new yardstick, because I've destroyed the one she had. Yeah. My husband still owes me for that one. We laugh about it to this day, and my parents still bring it up in public. I was in a rush to get to school one morning, and did not realize a second car was directly behind the car I was driving. I rammed into the back end of that car and broke the license plate. So I then had to take that car to prevent my mom from seeing it. I told my friend that my brother got in a fender bender, and I told my mom that my friend, the same friend, broke it by failing at a Dukes and Hazzards type slide on top of my car. So now they think all of my friends are irresponsible and overweight. Years ago, I was partying with a college friend at a bar in New Orleans, where he lived right out of school, in a big group, and his car was stolen. Years later he confessed to me that he decided to leave the bar early, accidentally drove into a swamp, and walked away from his vehicle as it descended into the muck. He then walked back to the bar and hung out the rest of the night, only to act surprised when his car wasn't there. Vehicle recovered 2 weeks later, and insurance paid it off in full. The guy's now an attorney, investigating corporate fraud. My dad told me on my 19th birthday that he had fathered a girl with another woman. He never mentioned that he was currently playing a role in the kid's life, and I never asked. He had never told my older brother and sister, but my mother knew. They were going to tell us all at one point, but he died before that ever happened. It was 7 years later. I act like I don't know about it. My sister somehow found out about it and was hinting about it at a family function, but never actually said anything. It gives me some small measure of satisfaction that I knew something this big before my big, naughty, shithead of a sister did. If she brought it up, I was fully prepared to not give a shit and just carry on. It hasn't changed my life in any way, really. I've never had any intention of meeting my half-sister, and probably give as much of a shit about them as they do about me, maybe less. Dropping that I know about it to my mother would probably cause her a considerable amount of grief at having to deal with it again. Not worth it. Recently I stayed in Costa Rica with a few of my friends and our tour group. I managed to convince someone that an animal broke a patch of the hotel patio shingles and they did the rest for me. In reality, I had been walking across the roof to a friend's balcony, and that wild animal may or may not have been my leg, and maybe also my torso, because I fell through the roof. I had my friends pull me up, and I just ran down to the room below and dragged them out, because I heard something out back. I worked at my dad's company when I graduated from college. I spent 2 years there. I tell people that I quit because it was essentially a dead end for me and that I needed to move on. And while that was true, that wasn't why I quit. I texted a bunch of people in an appropriate message as a joke, one of whom was a coworker of mine. She told our supervisor and said she now wasn't sure she felt comfortable working around me. The supervisor could tell that it was a joke and a misunderstanding on the coworker's part, but we both agreed that I was out of line. My dad found out later that day The next day I went in and gave my 2 weeks notice. I said that any action not resulting in my leaving could potentially be construed as favoritism, and I didn't want to risk my father's position and thus my brother's tuition and mother's alimony on a silly mistake at a job I had outgrown. The only people that know what really happened are my coworker, my supervisor, her supervisor, and my dad. Everyone else thinks I just got sick of the job and left. My roommate and I knew a younger guy, about 18. Had some major drug and alcohol problems. He was staying with us for a week to try and get clean, since he lived about 3 hours away. One morning, I come into the living room and we are watching TV when he says, "I think my roommate came in here last night and grabbed my dick. I think he molested me." I stare blankly and remind him that roommate had been in a different state on business for the past 2 days. He says nothing, but mutters under his breath. I know he was planning on trying to blackmail and besmirch my roommate's good name, but forgot that detail because of his drug-addled brain. He never got the chance. He went back to his home 2 days later and was in a serious car accident. He and his GF were both drunk, and neither of them remembered who was driving. Her because she was drunk, and him because he sustained massive head trauma and can't function properly. Can't talk, can't walk, can't use the bathroom, etc. If it weren't for his blinking and guttural moans, he'd be a complete vegetable. Here's the worst part, the part that pertains to this post. I never told anyone what he had said, or what I know he was planning. He was a piece of shit that was going to take advantage of my roommate, who is the best guy I know. After the wreck, my roommate was crushed. He thought he could done more to keep the guy safe, and he did everything he could for the guy and his family afterwards. He doesn't know what the low-life scum was going to do, and God help me, he never will.